An epic storm tears across a normally tranquil forest, turning a vibrant green world into a maelstrom of gray and mud. On a flooded back road, veteran Ranger Martin eased his battered pickup along the river's edge. Windshield wipers lost the war. At the heart of the chaos, a brave, disciplined Labrador named Shadow leaps from a truck and dives headfirst into the raging floodwaters. Martin's breath caught, can only watch in horror, unable to understand what could possibly make his dog act with such reckless abandon. Through sheets of rain, a flash of movement in the churning water reveals a small, struggling leopard cub, barely clinging to life. In a moment of extraordinary courage, Shadow fights against the torrent to reach the cub. Will they both make it back to shore? And what happens when a dog's act of compassion creates an impossible bond with the wild? For more than 30 years, the sprawling, sun-dappled green forests of the reserve had been Martin's sanctuary and his life's work. He considered nature his one true home. In all that time, his most constant and trusted companion was Shadow, a Labrador whose loyalty was as deep and unwavering as his glossy black coat. Shadow was more than a pet, he was a partner. Together they formed a silent, efficient unit, their days spent roaming through dense, winding trails, their senses attuned to the subtle language of the wild. Martin would note the scrape of a claw on a tree trunk or the faint impression of a hoof in the mud, while Shadow's keen nose and ears missed nothing, his presence a steady, reassuring beat at Martin's side. This peaceful rhythm was violently shattered when the rains came and refused to leave. For days on end, a relentless storm lashed the mountains and forests, turning the vibrant green landscape into a world of somber, shifting gray. The gentle river that snaked through the valley, normally a source of life and tranquility, swelled into a ferocious, churning flood. Water, the color of coffee and cream, rose with terrifying speed, tearing ancient trees from their moorings and sending rocks and soil sliding down the hillsides in great muddy waves. The routine patrol became an urgent and perilous mission. The ranger team was forced to split into small, mobile groups, fanning out across the vast, waterlogged area to assess the damage and provide support to the wildlife caught in the deluge. Martin steered his old, dependable pickup truck along a treacherous, slick track that ran parallel to the raging river. In the back seat sat Shadow, his powerful body tense, his ears erect and constantly swiveling, his intelligent eyes fixed on the churning chaos of the water. The sky above was a dark, bruised canopy, torn open by jagged flashes of lightning and the constant deafening roar of thunder. Gusts of wind howled past the windows, making the already heavy atmosphere inside the cab feel even more oppressive and somber. Suddenly, Shadow exploded into action. He leaped up from the seat and began to bark, a series of loud, frantic sounds that were completely out of character for the normally calm dog. His entire focus was locked on something outside the window, his gaze so intense it was as if he had discovered a matter of the utmost urgency. Reacting instantly to his partner's alarm, Martin slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt on the muddy track. He leaned over anxiously, trying to see what had agitated Shadow, but his own eyes could only make out the blur of the driving rain and the furious, roiling surface of the floodwaters. In the brief moment that Martin was still confused, trying to pierce the gloom, Shadow made a decision. With a powerful thrust of his hind legs, he leaped from the open window of the truck, launching himself like a black arrow straight toward the riverbank. A wave of panic and disbelief washed over Martin. "Shadow, no, come back," he yelled, his voice swallowed by the storm. He scrambled out of the truck, but it was too late. He could only watch in horror as Shadow's powerful black body was swallowed by the churning brown flood. Martin sprinted to the crumbling edge of the shore, his heart hammering against his ribs. He stared out at the torrent, his eyes straining, his mind a maelstrom of fear and confusion. He could not understand what could have possibly made his disciplined, intelligent dog act with such reckless abandon. Then, in the chaotic heart of a swirling whirlpool, his eyes caught a flash of movement. He saw a small, yellow-brown creature struggling feebly against the overwhelming power of the current, its head barely above the water as it was gradually pulled under in despair. It was a leopard cub. Its entire small body was drenched and battered, its eyes wide with a primal terror that tore at Martin's heart. He could see its chest heaving, each breath a desperate, failing gasp for air. The cub fought with a desperate, frantic energy, but its movements grew weaker and weaker with each passing second until it seemed to give up, surrendering to the raging power of the water. Just as the cub began to sink, Shadow reached it. He let out a hoarse, determined roar and rushed straight forward, his powerful jaws closing gently but firmly around the scruff of the leopard cub's neck, an action driven by a deep, unwavering rescuer's instinct. The water roared around them, a swirling, violent vortex that threatened to pull them both under. But Shadow fought back. He used all of his formidable strength, his powerful legs kicking, each stroke a resolute, determined battle to get closer to the shore. From the riverbank, Martin ran alongside them, shouting words of encouragement, his voice a desperate plea against the storm. "Come on, Shadow! You can do it! Bring him home, boy!" He was poised to jump in himself, ready to offer his own strength if he saw Shadow and the cub beginning to falter from exhaustion. Halfway to the shore, the tiny cub gradually stopped struggling, its body going limp in Shadow's hold. Its breathing was faint, its small form a dead weight as if it had given up completely. After what felt like an endless, heart-stopping eternity, Shadow finally broke free from the vortex's powerful grip. He approached the slippery, muddy bank, a treacherous mess of broken branches and debris. Martin dropped to his knees at the water's edge and extended his arms, grabbing hold of both the dog and the cub, pulling them the final few feet onto the relative safety of the shore. His heart was pounding in his chest, a frantic rhythm of fear and overwhelming relief. Shadow collapsed onto the ground, panting heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. He refused to loosen his jaws, holding fast to the cub until it was lying safely on the muddy ground beside him. The two of them, the rescuer and the rescued, lay still, their chests heaving in unison as the cold rain continued to fall. Martin knelt beside them, his eyes red with emotion, having just witnessed an act of courage and compassion so extraordinary it defied belief. The leopard cub trembled violently, its eyes squeezed shut, each weak breath a tiny, whispered plea for help. It was a fragile creature, hovering perilously in the balance between life and death. Martin worked quickly, wrapping Shadow in a warm, dry towel in the cab of the truck. The dog was soaked and shaken, but even in his own exhaustion, his worried eyes remained fixed on the small, still form of the leopard cub. With the cub bundled in another blanket on the passenger seat, the rescue vehicle sped towards the nearest veterinary center, its tires spraying mud as it raced against time. In the bright, sterile examination room, a veterinarian worked with gentle precision, carefully cleaning the mud from the cub's fur and using specialized equipment to check its heart and lungs. After a few tense moments, the cub let out a few soft, pained groans and then, miraculously, opened its eyes and blinked. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. There was hope for its survival. Shadow was also examined carefully. He was lucky, having sustained only a few small scratches, though he was deeply exhausted from his battle with the fierce water. A doctor emerged from the examination room a short while later, announcing that the leopard cub was expected to overcome its critical condition, provided it received special intensive care over the next few days. Martin bent down, his hand stroking Shadow's damp fur, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered his thanks. "You did it, boy. You saved him." His eyes shone with a profound pride. At that moment, he knew he had been privileged to witness a friendship that transcended species, a bond so pure and powerful it was worth remembering forever. In the days that followed, Martin was given a special and unprecedented mission to help Shadow take care of the leopard cub during its recovery period in a quiet, semi-wild area of the reserve. Martin named the cub Tumelo, a word meaning faith. In the early days, Tumelo was still shy and traumatized, often hiding in the corner of his enclosure, his eyes shining with an unfamiliar fear. Shadow displayed a patience that was nothing short of astounding. He would lie near the enclosure for hours, perfectly still, occasionally making deep, warm, rumbling sounds in his chest that seemed to reassure the frightened cub. One sunny afternoon, Tumelo hesitantly walked closer to the fence. He sniffed at Shadow, his small nose twitching, then suddenly rubbed his head lightly against the warm black fur of his savior. From that moment on, a remarkable friendship blossomed. The two of them played non-stop, chasing each other around the yard, their movements a joyous, uninhibited dance. They would roll together on the dry grass like two siblings, their species difference completely forgotten in their shared games. At night, when the cold wind blew down from the mountains, Martin would often look out and see them curled up together, their small figures intertwined, looking for all the world like two blood brothers. Day by day, Tumelo's health recovered at a rapid pace. His golden, rosette-marked fur, once dull and matted, gradually became shiny and smooth, and his eyes, once wide with fear, now shone with a growing determination and strength. Other rangers would often visit, standing in stunned silence as they witnessed the unusual friendship, scarcely able to believe that the scene before them was real. Martin cared for them both with a deep and equal love, never discriminating between them. He considered this incredible bond a rare and precious gift from nature. When Tumelo's health was fully stable, he was moved to a more spacious, semi-wild enclosure, a large area designed to simulate a natural forest environment. This was the next crucial step in his journey back to the wild. Martin took on the role of his direct guide, creating instinct training exercises to prepare him for the life he was born to live. He set up simulated hunting scenarios with hanging bait and created small challenges to test the cub's developing skills. Throughout this training, Shadow was a constant vocal supporter. He would often stand just outside the fence, barking loudly to encourage Tumelo, his presence like that of an older brother, urging his younger sibling to be brave and step into the world of independence. At first, Tumelo was clumsy in his attempts, his pounces awkward, and his stalking skills unrefined. But gradually, with Shadow's constant encouragement, he learned to stalk with stealth, to jump with accuracy, and to display the raw power that was his birthright. Martin observed and meticulously recorded every milestone of Tumelo's progress, his heart a mixture of immense happiness and a growing, gnawing worry about the inevitable day they would have to part. Tumelo's eyes began to exude a wild, predatory look, yet every time he saw Shadow, that wildness would melt away, and he would run to the fence to rub his head affectionately against his friend. Sometimes they would race along the fence line, Shadow on the outside and Tumelo on the inside, a game that was both fun and deeply touching to watch. Martin knew that one day not far off, Tumelo would have to leave this place to return to his own kind, to find his own territory and place in the world. Every afternoon, Martin would sit by the fence, watching the two of them play, his eyes heavy with thoughts of the coming separation he did not want to face. 6 months passed in what felt like a blink of an eye. Tumelo was no longer a small, frightened cub. He had grown into a magnificent young leopard, his body strong and muscular, his steps majestic, and his eyes bright with the bravery of a true predator. The day of his parting was set. The center prepared a special transport vehicle to take him to the distant grasslands, where he would be released into a protected area with other leopards. On that final morning, Martin brought Shadow for a last goodbye. The dog immediately rushed to the fence, licking his friend's face through the wire mesh, while the young leopard rubbed his head back and forth with a clear reluctance to part. The two of them clung to the fence, growling and barking, whining and purring, as if they were having their last urgent conversation, trying to say everything that was in their hearts. Martin's own heart was filled with a profound sadness. He knelt and hugged Shadow tightly, whispering into his soft ear, "We did the best we could for him, boy. We gave him his life back." As the transport team approached, Shadow let out a loud, clear bark, the sound of final, heartbreaking farewell that caused the entire team of rangers to stand still, their own eyes blurred with emotion. As he was being guided towards the transport cage, Tumalo turned to look at Shadow one last time, his eyes moist, as if wanting to permanently engrave the image of the one who had saved his life into his memory. The cage gate opened, and the young leopard stepped strongly into the vehicle, his posture proud, yet his eyes still full of a deep nostalgia for the only family he had ever known. When they reached the vast open grassland and the car door was opened, Tumelo leaped down onto the soft grass, breathing in the air of true freedom for the first time in his life. His strong legs propelled him forward in a powerful run, and he left behind a mighty growl that echoed across the vast and majestic space, a declaration of his return to the wild. Back at the release site, Shadow sat quietly next to Martin, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where his friend had disappeared. He let out one last loud bark, as if sending a final message of encouragement and love across the savannah. Martin gently placed his hand on Shadow's back, his voice a soft whisper. "We gave him a miraculous chance to live, my friend. A chance to be what he was born to be." In Martin's memory, the image of that terrifying, rain-swept and flooded day would always remain crystal clear, a constant and powerful reminder that even in its most destructive moments, nature is still filled with wonders, and that the bonds of love and friendship can create miracles that defy all explanation.